Now, if you're working in the NHS, Datix is often a pretty scary term. And that's because most of the time, the term is used completely wrongly. Fundamentally, what Datix actually is an incident reporting and risk management system that is used by the vast majority of hospitals across the country. It's effectively a way of reporting that something has gone wrong while someone is either at work or involved in patient care. It might be something like a needle stick injury, or a patient has had a fall on the ward, or a patient has received a drug that was prescribed for someone else. Terminology does vary slightly between NHS trusts, and all of them will specify exactly what they mean, but in the general case, to lift a quote, it refers to something like any unexpected or unintended incidents which could have or did lead to harm for one or more patients receiving healthcare. And personally, that should probably also be extended to include staff members and other service users as well. And fairly obviously, in a safety-critical environment like healthcare is, you need systems like this in place to track problems so that you know the incidence and frequency with which each one is happening and how dangerous they are and what the consequences might be, so that you can put safeguards and new processes in place to try and mitigate and stop them happening again. But all of this sounds really good, right? So why is the word so scary when it's used in the NHS like this? And why perhaps do so many staff have such a negative relationship with the term? And the answer to that is that Datix is most commonly used as a verb, by saying something like, I am going to Datix something, or more importantly, and perhaps sadly more frequently, I'm going to Datix you. You have done something that I don't agree with or has upset me in some way. So perhaps instead of using what formal grievance processes exist, going through HR, through a manager, whatever, I'm instead going to file a Datix and essentially incriminate you in something to do with substandard patient care, when really the nuances of the case might not reflect that at all. So essentially, workplace politics and disagreement is often the reason why Datix is used in this way, and thus why it's so unpopular, rather than what it's actually supposed to be used for, which is risk management. That can be a cause of massive anxiety for staff members who are then told that they've been involved in a Datix report, even if they haven't done anything wrong or haven't done anything unsafe, or the reality of the situation doesn't really reflect what's been reported in the Datix. And the effects of this will often be felt more severely if you only work in one perhaps very small department or with the same group of people. And this effect is so bad that the former chief executive of Datix, which actually is the proper name for the software that is used to report these incidents, has written a really good article on how frustrating this is. But taking a step back, like I've been saying throughout the video, the sort of purpose of Datix is that it's supposed to be used as a safety and learning tool. Hands up, I myself have been involved in multiple Datix reports and named. Twice because of mistakes that I genuinely made. They were clinical mistakes. In both cases, I realised that I'd made a mistake, fixed the problem, made sure that everyone was safe, which they were. No harm occurred, but I then submitted 2 Datix tickets, naming myself as the person involved, because they were potentially repeatable errors. So it was an attempt to reflect, try and work out why these things happened and whether another doctor in the similar circumstances might make the same mistake. And in all cases like this, doctors have something called a duty of candour, which requires you to discuss the fact that a mistake has been made with the patient, explain the various risks and benefits involved in what happened, and make sure that they're okay. And again, in both cases, the patients were completely understanding. They understood why the mistake had been made. They could see how it happened. And I think they actually appreciated being told what had happened and why. On the more negative side of this, a lot of my colleagues have just started working in trusts up and down the country as brand new FY1 doctors, or perhaps first stepping up to the SHO as a foundation year 2 doctor. And, you know, with this platform, I speak to a lot of people. Unfortunately, spurious and what I would call vexatious Datixes have already started going in against these particularly very new doctors. The most common one I get told about is SHO or whatever not answering their bleep when they were in theatre or dealing with an acutely unwell patient. And they are correctly, clinically prioritising the task in front of them and what should happen. There are, in many instances, going to be appropriate explanations for why something could or couldn't happen. And I think in a lot of these circumstances, it would be far better to have a conversation either at the time or afterwards before that Datix is submitted, because if it's not something that's particularly modifiable, or it did genuinely happen for a reason that no one in similar circumstances could have done anything about, then I think you've got to weigh up whether it will or won't be worth actually putting through the administration of the Datix system. But taking a step back, having done my little doctorly rant that I feel obliged to do about Datixes, the fact remains that if we want them to be an effective tool for which they were designed, that is risk management, incident reporting, and ultimately learning in order to keep patients safe, we as a multidisciplinary team, that is everyone working in healthcare to get the best outcomes for patients, we have to be both open to using it properly, learning from it and not being terrified when Datixes are submitted. And we also need to respect the process enough to not use it vexatiously, because if you start to do that, because if anyone starts to do that, it dilutes the quality of the entire pipeline and people develop these very negative relationships with it. And the best responses that I've had personally, the best responses that I've ever had putting in Datixes where I think everyone felt okay with it, is I would go and discuss it with all of the people involved first, which would always include, for example, the nurse in charge on a given ward, because it's them that will have to deal with it, and saying, look, this is what happened, this is the reason why I think it happened, and I think this warrants putting in a Datix, which I'm going to do, but I just want to debrief with you quickly on what happened, make sure I get the wording right, and make sure I'm not missing anything. Basically, I think getting a sense check from the people that are involved, if you are going to be naming them, is a courteous thing to do, just so that it doesn't come as a surprise when the Datix is raised and they're clear on why it's been submitted and what the likely outcomes are going to be. But to summarise, if people want to wrongly use Datix as a weapon, then that is how it will be perceived, that is how it will be understood, and that is how it will be used, particularly if you're the first one to use it that way. Which is a shame, and I think from one NHS staff member to another, I don't think that's right. Particularly from the position of an early careers doctor, which is a group that is unfortunately the victim of a lot of these threats. Datix can be a great and very powerful tool if it's used properly, but the onus is on us to use it properly. So thank you very much for watching, guys. It's a video all about Datixes. Have you ever submitted a Datix? Have you ever been a victim of a spurious Datix? Are you a doctor, nurse, physio, pharmacist, PA, whatever you are, let me know down in the comments. Take care, and I will see you next time. And if there are other topics you want me to talk about, and if there are other NHS topics that you want me to talk about here on the channel, I've got a lot of time now, so please let me know. See you soon.